recording. Okay, so today's thing, I want to talk about our last project. I was asking you guys to, the project that we're going to start today is our last and final project for the quarter. Our previous project that we just got done, I wanted you to upload to coursework last night, and that was the drawing that we're working on. Many of you were contacting me early and showing me the drawing and wanting some feedback on it. And I was looking at your drawings that you were emailing to me, and they look just fine. You guys are doing great. The whole idea of this was not to become a fantastic, wonderful drawer of drawings, but to explore maybe for the first time the idea of applying a range of values to a drawing, just so that you can start to understand how value works in a composition. So whether your drawing is awesome, fabulous, fantastic, or whether it's the first time you've ever done a drawing and it was a struggle, but you got something done, that's good, because all I'm interested in is the idea of exploring value in a composition. And it doesn't have to be a fantastic drawing. You learn how to draw in a college level drawing class. But in a design class, we're just going to play a little bit with the ideas of value so that you can add that to your artistic toolbox, and then you can apply that out of your artistic toolbox in a drawing class, a painting class, other art classes. And if you take art history, you would then understand what value is in art history. So that's all of that. Let's get on to the next project here. The next project I created and I put into coursework this morning, and it's a project that I'm calling, God, I wonder if I even opened it up, a texture collage. So I did a fantastic lecture on Monday morning about texture and texture collage for chapter 6. And those of you who missed it, it's too bad, because it's a really good lecture. However, I did record it and I did post it to our Zoom recordings so that you can go into that area and look at the recorded Zoom thing so that you can get kind of my interpretation of chapter 6. I want you guys reading chapter 6 this week. Read chapter 6. It's about texture. And really, your authors are going to talk a little bit about texture and then cover four, count them, 4 different types of texture that they differentiate from the world of texture. And I thought that was a really good place, a good point of departure for our final project. I want us to do a collage based on those 4 different types of texture. And so I'm going to go through my Vogue magazine, looking for several different kinds of texture. Plus, I'm going to draw a couple types of texture, an invented texture and an abstract texture. And I'm sorry, I got a cough going and I can't seem to clear my throat, so you'll just have to bear with me. So let's go over those 4 kinds of texture that are talked about in chapter 6. And I'm going to change cams to do that. So we're going to go to this cam. And if this cam doesn't work, of course it doesn't, we're going to go to this cam over here, because I want the bird's eye cam looking down on my workspace here. So the first kind of texture that I'm interested in is actual texture, the real thing. And for a collage, I'd like you guys to take a piece of Bristol board and actually you're going to collage these 4 different kinds of texture onto a piece of Bristol board. So I'm just going to take a piece of Bristol board out, and oh, look at that. I've already started playing with texture on a Bristol board. This would be a simulated texture, and we'll talk about simulated texture in a minute. But to go right along with that simulated texture, and this happens to be, no, this isn't. This is not that at all. This is abstract texture. I'm an old guy. I've been doing this for 20 years and I still get confused too. Okay, so this is an abstract texture because it looks like wood texture, but I have hand drawn it. It is somewhat abstracted from nature in that it is simplified and possibly rearranged or interpreted a little bit by the artist. And that's an abstract texture. Sitting right next to it and kind of screaming because I just tore it off of a tree is an actual texture. This is a real texture. This is a piece of a tree that I tore off of a branch of a tree and brought it inside. And so that is absolutely actual texture there. I can reach out and I can touch that thing. The actual texture, I'm going to want at least one of each one of these textures put into your final collage project. The actual texture is going to be pretty hard for me to determine when you take a photograph of it and then upload a photo for the homework for this. I was wondering if you might be able to just type out the 4 kinds of texture I'm looking for in the composition: actual, simulated, abstract, and um, invented. And if you could tell me what each one of those things is in your image so that I can say, oh yeah, the pine tree or arborvitae image in your photograph is an actual texture, because otherwise this just looks like um, another photograph of a texture to me, because it's a photograph of a photograph. So it's a photograph of a texture. So anyway, the actual texture, and this is a abstracted texture because it's, you know, it's kind of based on the idea of wood and wood grain, and all I'm doing is just kind of creating a, a kind of a shape that kind of deals with the idea, the concept of wood grain without getting too awfully crazy about it. So I've got a kind of a weird, interesting shape here that is an abstraction of wood grain. It's an abstract texture of wood grain. I've got the actual thing here. I'm looking for 2 other kinds of texture. Simulated texture is a photograph. I mean, basically a photograph can be a lovely simulated texture. I'm trying to get this photographic highlight, which is very shiny on the shiny paper, off of here so you can see this. So if I found this in the Vogue magazine and I wanted to use this, hey, I see lots of wonderful texture in this photograph. I see the background that's a bit out of focus, where the fashion model is standing outdoors in the woods and the trees or whatever. But for the most part, the things that are in sharp focus are her face and hair. The diamond jewelry that she's wearing is all in sharp focus, and I see those things as, you know, sharply focused simulated textures. And this silk or satin dress that she's wearing, it's a very wonderful silk satin dress, and so it's a wonderful, again, simulation of a texture. Because it is a photograph of a texture, it makes a wonderful simulation of that texture. And so I think I would probably choose, I'm going to do this super fast while I'm talking to you guys, I would probably choose to edit out the background, and I would focus on the foreground elements of this photograph if I was going to actually use it. And then once I get the background cut out of here, I might really want to zoom in on one particular shape area and maybe just edit that out and put that into my composition. But I'm taking out the background because it's out of focus, and it's really, you know, it doesn't do me any good at all. I want to focus on the sharply focused and sharply defined shapes in here. And maybe I want to even focus in tighter on just one shape. So I could, after I cut the background out, I could just cut out her head and maybe this plunging neckline right here, and only use the photograph of her face and diamond jewelry as my simulated texture. Or I could just cut out her arm and use that, or I could cut out like this shoulder area and the diamond stuff on her hand and kind of come down here. And I could use this big orange shape right in this area of the composition, and that could be my simulated texture right there. So as a artist, as a designer, I've got lots of choices with a great big photograph like that. Like this. I can edit out certain shapes out of this thing and just concentrate on the drapery folds and the luxurious luster of the silk satin thing itself. I could just cut out this sleeve right here, and I could cut out the arm and leave that out, and I could just use this area of the sleeve as an interesting shape in my composition. So I've got lots of choices, but eventually, somehow, I'd like to get this combined with that, and combined all on my compositional space so that it's not hanging way out into space. And so I'm just going to cut this out just to illustrate the point and then move on because you guys are getting bored. So cut this out, 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 out. That's enough. Stick her on there. Make sure that the wood texture is kind of showing out enough so that it's in the composition. But I also want you guys to start using overlapping a hell of a lot more. So we're going to overlap this image with all of this simulated texture over this image because it's already in here, so that things are overlapping. And then this could overlap too. And so now we've got 3 out of the 4 kinds of textures here, and that's really cool. If you want to take this extra piece of Bristol board, or if you have a couple of wasted pieces of Bristol board that didn't quite work out for one reason or another, if you've got smudged ink on another one, you can go ahead and draw your your abstract texture on a piece of scrap Bristol board, and then with a scissors cut it out. So you can cut out that shape, and then you can collage that shape in with your other elements onto a brand new piece of Bristol board. So that means you could take this one and slide it around and compose with it anywhere you want with the other elements in the composition. I just wanted to show you guys that I was going through and just kind of looking for a bunch of stuff today to see if I had some things that I could work with. So here's an abstract example of texture that I've got here. Yay. Okay. I found this piece of fabric, which is actually, kind of see-through fabric. It's a super open weave fabric. This is actually what you put inside of your drawers as a non-skid surface to put stuff. It's a drawer liner material, and we use it in ceramics. And so I've got it cut out for the top of a pottery wheel head. But anyway, this is a wonderful texture. I can touch it, I can feel it, because it is it has a lot of holes in it and stuff. I could really overlap it with other kinds of things too, which would make it really interesting to overlap, because I could overlap the image of the head, but I could then reveal and display the image of the silk dress or silk shoulder area. And so that's how we could play with this stuff. We got actual textures. They can be fabric. They can be candy wrappers. I really love taking a piece of aluminum foil and crumpling up the aluminum foil and then spreading it back out again and then cutting it into an interesting shape, because aluminum foil crumpled up is a wonderful texture in a composition. So that might be, those are all good ideas for actual textures in the composition. This is an image, so this is a simulated texture. This is an image, but I found this talking about, this was the article on designer masks and stuff like that. And so I was actually looking at the pattern, and let's call it a texture, in this mask, and thinking that could also be considered an abstraction of some kind of a texture. It could be an abstraction of an animal print like tiger stripe or something like that. It could be an abstraction of water. There's a lot of wonderful, interesting movement in there. It's an abstraction I don't know exactly what of, but I would consider something like this if it was an image from a magazine where there was a big enough shape that you could cut out, and it really was something that looked like it could be an abstract texture, or even possibly an invented texture. You could cut out the mask itself, or you can cut out the mask with the fashion model. It's up to you, and use that and claim that to be your your abstracted texture. So that's one possibility. I found this one in the Vogue magazine, and this is a painting in the middle of a story. And so this is kind of an invented texture here between this scribbly scratch. This is kind of like doodling turned into a painting. This is an actual painting that was shown in a gallery that was bought by collectors. It's a no joke. It's an actual painting. And so this is an example of an invented texture. And so you guys could invent textures just by, I guess I'll do it on the back of this thing. Your invented texture can be any kind of gestural, scribbly, um, thing, chicken scratchy thing that you do to create your own invented texture. And so those of you who are scribblers, who like to doodle while you're talking on the phone, those people who like to doodle on the edges of the notes that they take in classes and stuff like that, this doodle right here, if I can get down on it, get down on it. Come on, you, get down, come here, get down on this thing and focus. 1, 2, 3, 4. It won't focus. Okay, focus, please focus. Okay, focus. It has a really hard time focusing up close. Anyway, the concept is that it is an invented texture, and you invented it just by doodling, just by doing chicken scratch, that kind of thing. So that kind of thing could be an invented texture worked into your composition. And now I got to clamp this back up where it goes. So excuse me, clamp it back into place and get my thing going and straighten it out so that everything is copacetic and wonderful. All right, sorry about all that. That was it. That was terrible. Anyway, that could be an invented texture. And so inventing textures is not hard. Invented textures are not difficult. You can do this. Anybody can invent an invented texture, and it doesn't take long. I'd like your invented texture to be a more interesting shape. If you can make it a little bit more biomorphic shape, kind of make it a blobular, shape that might have a couple of lobes or a couple of legs on it or something like that, so that when you cut it out and collage it in with your other stuff, or when you draw it on your piece of Bristol board and then collage your other things over the top of it, that it will overlap and work itself into the rest of the composition. So invented texture is okay. Abstract texture is okay. Simulated texture is okay. I looked at text. I just sampled out a page of text, and I thought, well, I could cut out, again, a kind of a biomorphic form shape out of this column of text, and maybe cut it out so that it included this piece of text as well as a bunch of text up above and below and on the side. This then could be thought of as texture. I'm not exactly which kind of texture it is. Simulated, abstract, actual. I guess it's real text. It's probably an actual text, and that's possible. If you guys, some of you might be English majors. You might like reading and writing and all of that kind of stuff. You might love the art that happens on the page, and page design, publication design is using text, as a design element to create well-designed layout and pages for books, magazines, websites, whatever. And so don't forget that text is also could be considered a texture. We'll have to make a case for it about whether it's a texture or not, but you can. Okay, here's another photograph of this great big full-page photograph of a garden, outside nature landscape kind of a thing. All of this is texture. You could edit out any one of these or several of these as textural elements, and it would be a simulated texture because it's a photograph of trees and whatnot. You could kind of cut all of the background out of this and use this as the first layer of your collage that you're going to do, and then you could populate this with other cutout things that could be other fashion models, um, simulated tech. I'm sorry, I keep saying that. Abstract textures like your your hand-drawn wood texture or something like that. Hand-drawn um, pond with water on it. Even just the little wiggles on the top of a pond could be a simulated, I'm sorry, an abstract texture of the surface of water. And you could kind of put a pond here of water, and that could be an abstracted texture. And then you put your invented texture in there too. Last thing I wanted to show you about all of this stuff was a photograph of a fashion model. So she's in nature, she's in a landscape, so there's lots of landscape texture here. There's water texture in the background, blah, blah, blah. I was interested in how we might kind of feel about the print in the dress, because the print in the dress, this makes great big shapes that are possible for us to cut out and collage into a composition that is interesting. And this is a floral print. It's a bunch of roses with leaves on a black background. And so you could conceivably, take chunks of this dress and use it as an abstract texture, because it's an abstraction of like a rose garden or a field of roses or an up close area of a bed of roses or something like that. So conceivably you could cut out the entire fashion model and use her in your composition and claim that this was your abstract, yes, abstract texture, because of the abstract nature of the roses in the floral print in the dress. But otherwise, it is a photograph, so it is, simulated textures for all of these actual real things that are in the photograph, the landscape, the actual fashion model with her facial features and everything. That's all simulated texture. But the floral print in her dress would be an abstract texture. So that's a possibility for that. Anyway, this I'm going to bring us back to my face now. So concept here is to create a composition that's interesting, that has visual interest to it, visual variety, and yet enough factors of cohesion, factors of visual linkages in the composition to allow the composition to hold together and not just be a bunch of 4 different shapes that are floating separate from each other, glued down to a piece of Bristol board. I really want as much overlapping, sharing of edges, close visual connectivity in the composition so that the composition works together. There can be some negative spaces. This doesn't have to be a coverall kind of a collage thing. But it's nice when you bring your compositional elements into close proximity with each other, or share an edge where they're actually touching, or overlap them, or overlap all of them, because all of those things are factors of visual cohesion, factors of visual linkage in a composition. And the tighter you make the visual linkages, the more the composition holds together as a strong integrated composition. So I wanted to leave you with those kinds of ideas. In the assignment for this last collage on texture, I have uploaded a printout of that. And the second page of that printout not only is the assignment, but there's also the final exam study guide. The final quiz study guide is the second page of my upload to you. So you will find that in the coursework under the assignment for the texture collage. So it's the vocabulary words and concepts from the last 3 chapters, chapters 4, 5, and 6, the chapters that we read covering shape, value, and texture. And so I want you to familiarize yourselves with those concepts, because on Monday, November 23rd, we're going to have a quiz. And that quiz is going to be 20 questions, multiple choice, no fill in the blank, all multiple choice, that will cover those vocabulary terms and concepts from the last 3 chapters. It should be fairly easy. You should be able to blast through it, but I would like you to familiarize yourself with those terms and concepts, and maybe just glance over chapters 4, 5, and 6 before you take the quiz, so you can ace the quiz and leave on a really high positive note to go home for Thanksgiving and to take a well-deserved break from school. So our assignment is texture collage with examples of the 4 kinds of textures discussed in chapter 6. And I made the due date on that Monday, November 23rd, so that you even had the weekend to work on it. So if you're still working on the value study drawing, get that done and get it uploaded. I think I've even extended the due date on the value study drawing so that you can still turn it in if you haven't yet. I think I've extended the due date on the value scale so that you can make sure that that got done and get that uploaded too. And then finally, this last thing is the texture collage. And I think we're going to get together on Friday of this week, a couple days from now, and maybe we'll do a little bit of critiquing. We can finally, talk about our drawings, our value drawings, and have you guys have them ready as an open document on your computer so that you can share screen and we can maybe do a little give and take with the value study drawings that we did for the chapter on value. Let's do that on Friday. We'll have an oral critique talking about the drawings on Friday. And then if you want to, you can show a little bit of your value of your texture collage if you are a Zoomer and get that done really fast too. But otherwise, primarily on Friday, I want to be discussing the value study drawings. So that's what we're going to do on Friday. That's all I got. I'm going to stop talking now. I'm going to say goodbye, but I'm going to keep this open for a couple of minutes. And those of you who want to quit can take off. And anybody who wants to stay and ask me a question that doesn't want to ask it in front of anybody else because, you don't like to talk in front of other people, you can stay and ask me the question. And those 2 or 3 others of you who want to stay to listen to the question that somebody asks because you like eavesdropping and maybe you'll learn something from it, you can stay too. And then in about 2 or 3 minutes, I'm going to close it up. So thank you for joining us. Goodbye for now, and I'll see you again on Friday. But I'm now hanging out for a couple of minutes to answer questions. Kira, you were the first one in and the last one here. What a deal. Oh. I know Ethan was here, Kiara was here. Okay, Kiara's still here. Do you have a question for me? Is there anything that I can help you with today? Okay, for the good of the order, I'm going to say goodbye for now for reals and turn off and end the Zoom meeting. So goodbye for now.